Hi everyone. In this video, let's try to understand few more concepts which related to the storage account. In the previous video, we have discussed about the first six. Let's cover the next rest of the six top concepts which related to the storage account. And one is related to the first one is related to the Bob access tier. So when we store the files, the folders in the blobs, when we choose the containers as the service to store our data, we are storing the files and everything. So there are three types of access tiers specifically when we are storing our data. Do you wanted it to be preferred in hot tier or cool tier or archive tier? Why this access tiers is very important? Because Azure is charges based on two reasons: how much amount of space are you occupying, or your data is occupying, and next is how frequently your data is being accessed. So based on this, you will be charged for the storage account utilization, so the service utilization. And the Hottier says that we charge you for the storage space very high, and whereas the access it could be frequently, this will be a more frequent data, so we will charge you for less for the access part. So whenever your application or your workload is actually trying to access the files very frequently, then you can prefer to keep those files in hot tier. And whereas in cool tier it try to says that we'll charge you less than or sorry, we'll charge you more than what your hot tier is actually charging for accessing the files in the cool tier, but we will charge you less for the amount of space that data which is being kept in a cool tier. Whereas in archive, it is saying that we'll charge you very less for the storage space, uh, your data which is been kept in archive tier, but we will cost you very high, will charge you very high for the data which you're trying to access it, which has been in archive tier. So you will ensure that your blobs, your files are actually in archive tier when they are not being at all frequently used. Only when there is a need, once in 6 months or once in a year or once in 2 years, when you wanted to access, you will keep your data in archive tier. But if you are planning to access your data once in 2 months or once in a month or once in 3 weeks and all that, that kind of cases you can keep your data in cool tier, and where you have a frequent read and write operations to your files, or update operations to your files in then you keep it in hot tier. So that's how you actually plan your access tier. So but in reality what happens, the trouble challenging is how do we segregate when we have too many blobs or containers in our storage account? How do we ensure that we can move those to hot, cool, and archive so that we can maintain, we can effectively manage our cost for the storage account? So for that we have lifecycle management of blobs. So if you go under storage account, you can under see the blades left side, you'll see lifecycle management, and you can keep some conditions like whenever the blob has been created more than 30 days, move it to cool tier. Whenever the blob is not been modified from the last 90 days, then shift it to archive tier. Whenever the blob is not been modified from the last 7 years, then move delete that blob. If at all the blob has been modified last 30 days, then move it to cool tier. So you can keep this kind of conditions so that yeah, you blobs are actually managing effectively, and this is one of the optimal solutions in terms of managing your cost for your storage accounts when you're storing the files in your block and containers. And the next one is about network connectivity. As data is a very critical part of any organization or very important as a part of their service, and once the data will be lost or leaked, they will have incur some losses, financial losses, or customer trust. They might lose the customer trust because of the data leakage and all that. So because of all these key factors, we organizations will ensure that a very critical data will be, or any data, organizational data will not be available for through the public endpoints. So they will disable the public endpoint access to the storage accounts, and in fact they will select the further options where only through internal network they wanted to access this data, and they'll have user delegation through SAS keys and all that. But even after ensuring that the access is happening from storage account explorer and or access Azure portal or PowerShell and everything, we also want to ensure that only specific resources from a specific network are being able to access these storage accounts. That's about network tier. And if we get into the next topic, we have recovery. So whenever you have enabled blob versioning and all that, it's equally important to ensure that you are enabling soft delete options for blobs and containers. Why? Because what is soft delete? So when you deleted your data, even then it will be kept in hold without deleting it permanently, or it will be kept in recycle bin for a couple of days wherever you mentioned. If you we have mentioned it be retained for 7 days even after delete, then it will be kept in recycle bin or like a backup for 7 days, and after that it will be permanently deleted. So within this 7 days after you deleting your blob, if you wanted to restore it and all that, you wanted to undelete or recover your deleted one, you can do that. So that's how the power of a soft delete. And the next one is about encryption. So when you wanted to store your data in storage account, Azure is saying that by default we'll encrypt your data whichever you're storing in storage account using Microsoft managed keys. But if you want to bring your own encryption keys, then you can choose the option called customer managed encryption keys. And you can, when you're choosing the customer managed encryptions, you can actually choose to say whether you wanted to go for file share blobs or all the services in the storage account. And what is the option called you see here, which is enable infrastructure encryption. You are encrypting the data which is stored in the storage account, but if you want to even encrypt the data you want to encrypt the entire hardware where the actual data is being stored, the physical hardware where in Azure is being stored, even that hardware you wanted to be encrypt, then you can actually enable this option called enable infrastructure encryption. Because Azure is saying that whichever data you're storing in a hardware, that's because of the cloud feature, which is resource pooling. You will be the data, the disk, the underlying hardware might store other customers' data too, because of the resource pooling and everything concept. Now, it is encrypting your data which you are storing in your storage account, either whichever option you preferring, with either Microsoft managed or the customer managed. But the underlying hardware disk, if you wanted to even prefer that to be encrypted, then you can actually go ahead and enable this option. And that's how you can actually uh, uh, do the encryption for your data in your storage accounts. And the next one is object replication. So let's assume that you have workloads in different regions. We have one workload which is in India, we have one workload which is in UK, one workload which is in East US. Now, in such cases, how would you actually plan your data which is being stored in one storage account in one region? How it can be, if you can actually ensure that your workloads are directly accessing this storage account, but please expect a delay in response. You'll expect a latency, and you'll expect the lower performance because all the workloads are actually going and accessing one storage account. Instead, the better one is using the object replication. We can have storage accounts in each of these regions and say that I want to replicate the data to the other storage accounts. So it could be in other subscription, the storage account, and it could be a different storage account. That's the whole point. You can actually, if you wanted to replicate your data into other storage accounts so that the workloads can have lower latency while accessing the data, and the performance of the storage account will also be better when that is we are choosing the other regions to access data from other storage accounts. So data which is being written in this storage account can be replicated to the other storage accounts in other regions. So this is how object replication will help in terms of accessing the data efficiently. So these are the concepts which you can see in a storage account. So these are good enough to understand how to store the data, what are the features which we have in storage account, and how effectively we can cost manage the data which we are storing, and how effectively we can manage the data which we are trying to store in the storage account. And so access keys and SAS keys talk about authentication. What type, when you wanted to access the store data, you have the authentication for the access keys. We even have RBAC rules. So I've shown you that too. If you have any further questions, you can ask me over the comments. But this are the few the concepts which you have to keep in mind while you're going for an interview, or when you wanted to understand about storage account. Please research and deep dive in more on in practicing about these concepts about a storage account. Thank you.